we are going to start with possibly the most interesting album to talk about in terms of bands making plays and bands making shifts, and certainly I think the most spoken about album at large of the bunch, both going into it and in the reception it's receiving. There is buzz here for good reason. It's Venom Prison and the record Erebos. Venom Prison's third album. A lot of people don't seem to realise that the last thing they put out wasn't an album. It was re-recordings of their demos with a couple new songs. So this is the third album. But Venom Prison have been one of our favourite bands for years. If you were plugged into the UK heavy music underground, then the rumblings that Venom Prison made when they emerged were pretty sizable and have only picked up speed and strength every single year that they've been going, to the point that we reviewed them at Bloodstock Festival last year, which you can go and find the footage of on YouTube, of them playing on an outdoor stage with full pyro going off, looking like death metal rock stars. It feels like a death metal band in the UK coming of age in a big way. That was just over 6 months or so ago. Still didn't even prepare me for the acclaim that Erebos is now receiving on a widespread level. This thing is setting people fucking alight, right? Far and wide.
Yeah, and with good reason. I mean, I have been one of those persons since like the EPs and the debut album. I think Venom Prison have always been brilliant. I love Animus. I think it's one of like my favourite debuts of the last decade. Samsara was a huge step up from that and in sort of improving what they did. But the leap from Samsara to Erebos is the biggest like jump this band have made, and it is exciting times.
You love to see it. I've been into them since Animus, pretty much, like kind of similar to you. I don't think I liked them as much as you. I thought they were great live. I didn't see them on Samsara, so I can't say if
that changes things. Let me tell you.
Yeah, but like I like them a lot. One of the things that I always thought was like the missing piece. I don't want to sound like a prick, but actual songs. I really loved a lot of it. Like the riffs are fucking great, but like when they did Slayer of Holophonies, however you say that, like that chorus with the kind of like Travis Ryan kind of like that set them apart. That was something that people could really grapple onto outside of people who just like kind of extreme metal.
I know what you mean by that, because I remember in the early days particularly, like it'd kind of be like I'm kind of enjoying it, but they wouldn't go mad for a particular song until Perpetrator.
Yeah, Perpetrator Emasculation. Like when they do that, that was the one. That's an outlier in it.
That was it. That was the outlier. That was the kind of one that now everyone goes batshit for, that song in particular. But I see what you mean. Like I liked the songs. I think like there's loads of great stuff on there. But I understand what you mean by there wasn't like necessarily, they weren't writing like massive songs. They were just writing like really cool like collections of riffs and stuff like that. Like,
well, they're a death metal band, and
that's what they do.
Yeah,
they've had a hell of a campaign just going into Erebos, and wow, has it caught people's attention in the week since its release. And we were expecting something a little different, because on that compilation there were new tracks that, as you mentioned, Alec, showed them changing gears in quite significant ways, introducing vocal melody and things like that, but not in so obvious and trite a way as a all screams metal band whacking in a chorus could sound on paper or in your head. Even that though sounds very tentative compared to what they've actually done on Erebos. They've gone a bit mental with this record, haven't they?
The upping of the scope and the scale of this album is insane compared to where they've been before. Like the amount of ideas they decide to cram in, whether it's like choruses, the use of electronics, the kind of like cinematic moments, they have just gone, we're going to have all of our ideas they're happening on this album. And but they do it in such a cohesive way, and it's fucking amazing.
One of the things that I'm kind of a bit like, oh, what if, is apparently there were a bunch of more electronic stuff that didn't make the album because it just ended up getting like wiped or deleted. It's proper like the dog ate my homework, but so you don't have that, and you have all these bits and pieces everywhere, which we will discuss. But I think I don't know, like, I know we're going to talk about a lot of different influences and a lot of different pieces, but at its core, it is like is a Melodeath album, isn't it? And I think the kind of step up that people are talking about, it is like an At the Gates going into Slaughter of the Soul, or Carcass into Heartwork, or In Flames into Colony, and not just in terms of like the stylistic shift, but in my opinion, quality as well.
Well, it's. I do think it's really something to behold when you consider where Venom Prison have been, and to give them utmost credit, the kind of leaps that death metal bands usually make. Because, like, I adore death metal. It's absolutely one of my favourite genres that's producing huge chunks of my favourite music all of the time. But it is a genre more predisposed to kind of gradual creative evolution over time than enormous leaps from one record to another. Someone like Carcass, when their heyday, would be an outlier to that. The way you might get in genres, less caked in extremity. And Venom Prison have morphed record upon record before this, but the jump from the Venom Prison of the past to this album still feels like startling in how wide it is. I find it really heartening that Venom Prison have gotten into this record clearly with a mindset of, let's not pencil ourselves into a corner. Let's not become a rigid, reliable, which the death metal scene has plenty of, and it needs them, but let's not be one of them. This is one of the most creatively unshackled records you will hear from a heavy and popular band like Venom Prison this year, or most years. The popular thing being relevant because this band have a following already. Like, they've got a reputation and expectations, and they've clearly not let that tether them in any way.
Well, I mean, like, for a death metal band, they are one of the death metal bands who do appeal to people who don't like death metal. I mean, I quite like death metal. I don't like it anywhere nearly as much as you two do. But Venom Prison are like one of those bands I have been massively into for ages now. And they've kind of just grown that. And so I know people who don't listen to any death metal who are super stoked on, like, this new Venom Prison record.
And it's accessible without skimping on the heaviness, because they still sound very much like Venom Prison, but like the production is done by Scott Atkins, who has done like Amon Amarth and Cradle of Filth and Sylosis, so it sounds...
That makes sense.
It sounds huge, but then even when Venom Prison, they did that Damnation Festival set with Joe Quayle, and after that there was a Kerrang interview, and I think it was Larissa. She was saying maybe we'll have cello on the next album, and lo and behold, that's what you get, and a bunch of other shit as well. It's what you're saying about death metal for people who don't like death metal. That's a compliment, not like a diss.
Yeah, absolutely a compliment.
Yeah,
I want to go back to the production thing you mentioned, because for a start, like, again, there are a lot of fucking extra bits that we're going to have to go through, but I want to kind of go from the ground up in terms of the simple band attack front and how the band sounds. That's the through line, in the sense that they were a groovy, hardcore laced death metal band, and that still forms the core of the matter here. That's what's in common. But you can tell in a second on any one of these songs whether you are listening to Erebos or whether you are listening to Samsara, their previous album, because the style of riffing here and how that engine is recorded is a huge step away from Samsara, where this sonically sounds like a far less underground album in the way that bands like Amon Amarth and stuff that you just mentioned, the producer having done before, do. And immediately when you look at the amount of people that this record is currently winning over, that makes an awful lot of sense. Judges of the Underworld eases you in at the start of the record with a riff that is classic Venom Prison, like that technical death metal meets pummeling hardcore brutishness. The way that rumbling starts is so clearly, from the same seed that they have been watering from Animus onwards. But as opposed to Samsara, which was like being sat in the middle of a tornado of knives, it is concentrated with this real kind of discipline and restraint and focus in kind of delivering to that to people in a kind of a more accessible way.
I think like the big difference there is like the solos on this record. Like, again, they have that kind of like wailing, unhinged thing, but when you think of the solos on Samsara and how wild and untamed they were on that, there is just a greater like level of control, and like it's all those bits of that where you can go, there is still the band who are playing on Samsara. You can still feel that, but it's more disciplined now.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people saying that how much of a step forward in quality this is from Samsara for its creative liberation and I guess simultaneous, bigger audience style riffs and grooves. And Samsara at the time was quite well praised for not exactly repeating the formula of Animus and being a leap forward in songwriting. Samsara was in my top 5 albums of that year. I think Samsara
it was the same for me.
Is an exceptional death metal album, and Samsara is the harshest, most caustic and blood-spitting record this band may ever make, if this is the direction they're going to go down. That record is unbelievably dense in its construction and recording. The detail in songs is startling, but that record really fucking batters your ears, and it hurts. It's meant to. And it's a challenging record to put yourself through and survive in that sense. When it comes to the more, I guess, accessible shift on this album, I've seen people saying that they much, much prefer that, and maybe they couldn't even listen to Samsara all that much because it was too abrasive. If that's your preference, that's fair enough. And, you know, if you're happy that you're doing something broader and less suffocating for your tastes, I am also happy about the changes going on this record, but from the point of view that I have Samsara, which I love quite dearly, and they've made this unrelentingly, terrifyingly extreme record, and that can kind of sit on its own pedestal while they move on to do something else that's not repeating it. That's where I'm at.
That is the mindset that they had. Like Larissa's basically said, we did the first 2 records, it was kind of us establishing ourselves as a band, like we are this death metal band, this is what we do, but we don't want to keep doing that anymore, because there are loads of bands who do that, who just do the same thing, and it's great, but we don't want to do that. We want to try a lot of like different stuff. You have Samsara, you have Animus, let's go for something else.
But it's doing that, but still keeping the root of that core, that seed that was what made me fall in love with Venom Prison. And I think that's what makes this album so great, is that they have been able to blossom out from that and do all these new things. But at its core, when you still want this album to rip your face off with a riff, they can just switch that on at any second, and it's so thrilling in that way.
Yeah, the element of Samsara that I think they have intentionally kept and furthered is guitar melody, because Samsara had these incredibly cool Carcass-esque melodic lead lines, the way a song like Asura's Realm had that really ear-catching start. There are parts of this record where I feel like I'm listening to what Arch Enemy were to 2000s metal for today. Like, not just because there's a song called Nemesis on it, but like for today's metal audience, with the further development of the genre and the kind of increased genre melding density of metal today. You're right, Alec. Parts of this are outright melodeath.
Yeah, like
Comfort of Complicity.
Yeah, that bit, that bear witness
That's
to the Great Divide with those leads going off behind it. It's fucking, chef's kiss. Like that, kind of like the Michael Amott kind of like whittling and just like...
Yeah, in the intro track as well, huge Amott lead.
Yeah, and just like those solos as well that you were talking about. Like there were a few like really cool solos on Samsara, like Uterine Industrialization and Self-Inflicted Violence have both got like fucking wicked solos, but they're all over this record, and it's not just like messy slop death metal solo. It's just all about like kind of like bringing it to like to somewhere new, and that's what a solo should do. And just that they are packed all through this and they all do that successfully is just, they've just got such a fucking good understanding of writing songs, which again, if someone who'd only heard Animus then heard this, like the difference in the approach is quite startling.
Well, I think that the last couple of minutes of that song are fucking mental in terms of like the solo lifting the whole song's temperament really with it, because they have had great guitar solos before. I think that their whole career really, Ash has been doing some really talented guitar shit, but they've never had something go as fully bright as that song gets by its
genuinely uplifting.
Yeah,
right?
And like Larissa is still fucking coughing her lungs up over it while he's going full guitar god. It's mental. There are even bits of like bluesier playing on this record at times allowed when things open up more, which never really happened before. But that landing on like a really rousing melodic death metal core is kind of crazy. Like there's the final drop in Castigated in Steel and Concrete when it goes like full a monomath epic. But to go back to Comfort of Complicity, as well as where that song reaches by the end, that's one of my favourite tracks on this. And the first 25 seconds has a big, slightly unwieldy riff that's like something off Carcass's Swan Song. It goes straight into a super technical but kind of atmospheric death human more style idea. And then the swing in the riff you get is Lamb of God. And then after that, the turn into fucking fast-paced melodeath. And that's all inside the first minute. It's really thrilling, every individual burst and turn. And none of those things, I guess, feel out of sync with any other one.
It's modern metal, and I think that's the thing. You can approach this as a death metal album, and you can sell this to someone as a death metal album. If someone goes, "Oh, what kind of metal like should I be listening to in 2022?" You can just give them that. Like, it's just all the stuff that is good about metal.
I mean, like you talk about like you wouldn't get like the intro to Golden Apples of Hesperides, is it? The way that song begins, you would never get that on any other death metal without like really like electronic sort of heavy intro, and like the fact that they're fitting in stuff like that, but then it goes and then follow up with just a pummeling death metal riff.
Yeah,
as
the
well.
biggest
like,
death metal barrage of carnage on the record, which I fucking love. But that you're right, that intro is so unexpected, and yet it totally works that particular moment. Like it creates that tension, pulling it back, and then the death metal. The way they use the turbocharged building blocks of the death metal we know and love, but offset it with these other elements to kind of enhance those. It's quite exciting to see how far that kind of thing will go. Larissa's vocal parts have, I think, been the most obvious thing to track from release to release in terms of broadening their wings. Going back to Judge of the Underworld, which is the first proper song on the record, that are you the oppressor or the oppressed? Fucking awesome, in terms of the big, harsh vocal hooks in that vein, which she has been getting better at. Across the record, there are those like huge chest-beating chants of Erebos. I love the fucking seek justice in the last song, like really good. But those hooks, again, they have been, I guess, the furthest Venom Prison have gone that kind of areas in the past. Judge of the Underworld hits that guilty as charged.
I've had that in my head.
Me too.
Like
it's the catchiest metal chorus of the year so far. Somehow I've been singing that for weeks.
Yeah, like that. Like the thing is, they've always had like good kind of like shout along moments on some of their records, but that is like taking it just the step further. Like Judge of the Underworld is just brilliant. How much that goes through, like the fact that they've got this sort of death metal song, but then got this huge chorus, and then the breakdown at the end, just where they slow it down as well on the choose your side bit, like. That song is incredible, but it is that chorus melody that is just the standout moment.
Well, you have in that song, in the middle of it, there's a brilliant like Fear Factory style machine gun riff with just the dig. At the end, there's the classic Venom Prison death metal beatdown at the end, which is brilliantly deployed. In between those two things, there is the bridge of that guilty as charged melody, made even more spacious and melancholy, and it's added a more dynamic way of writing their songs, I guess, that are still full of like kind of the reliable Venom Prison parts that are on either side of that. Like, what do you make of the onus on melody, I guess? Because there's one song in particular that is the largest leap. We'll save that one for now. But melodic vocals and guitars as well are a feature across almost this whole record.
I think it's a great addition. I think the melody in the guitars is the bigger part, really. It's the one that's more heavily featured.
It's more
throughout.
consistent, yeah.
Yeah. But just the increased melodic vocals, it just gives it that slightly more accessible edge but it never feels like a compromise on how intense and heavy Venom Prison are, and I think that's what makes it work. Like if you felt like they were compromising their core to be melodic, it would maybe not land, but it never feels like that for me.
Yeah, and I think having those melodic moments in the vocals, it allows them to do other things. So, like the bit in Veil of Night, that all the stars in the sky falling down in demise, that with like the strings like behind it, like if they weren't kind of like doing those earworms, like I don't think those strings would sound as like grandiose and huge as they do. But when they are accompanying Larissa, just like kind of leading the way, like it's so impactful.
For me, the melodic vocals, I think, emblematic of how wide this record has cast its net, because there's not quite one consistent usage of them. To me, it sounds like they are trying different ways of utilizing clean vocals in a death metal band, and there isn't quite one that's stuck yet. You have some points of kind of quite thin kind of cleans in the back of the mix somewhere, have a slightly synthesized sound to them sometimes. Like the backing vocal in Cascade and Steel and Concrete has that element that's closer to what bands like Cynic and that do, and they have that kind of sci-fi flair, which is really strange. You have had in the past on Slayer of Holophonies from the previous compilation, Larissa was trying out that kind of Travis Ryan style strangle sang Castle Decapitation chorus, which doesn't really return as an active feature here, so they've done that one. And then you have Larissa's more kind of naked cleans in Pain of Oisies, and it's like they are testing out all of these ways of like how to carry a clean melody in a death metal song, and perhaps next time out we will see more of a zeroing in on the approaches that they feel have really stuck and really fit best in the world that Venom Prison inhabit, which is one with a level of atmosphere to it as well as mere brutality. In that sense, Pain of Oisies, I saw that they had released it as their second single from this record, and people said it was different. I decided to let it come to me first in the album. And if something like Judges of the Underworld, I could tell you it's Venom Prison immediately. It just has clean vocals and more use of volume dynamics. Pain of Oisies, if you had told me 5 years ago that's what Venom Prison sounded like, could not have seen it whatsoever. It's a mad song.
It is the big departure track on the album, and I think I didn't listen to it as a single either, but I'd kind of heard the rumbling, so I was waiting for it to come, and then I was like, oh, okay, cool, this is what they're doing, and I love it. There's kind of Larissa laid bare for the verses, the way it sort of snaps into life and adds in the intensity when she starts screaming. Ash doing his soloing again just gives it a real sort of. I mean, that's when we talk about the sort of the bluesy solos. That's one of the ones on that where it adds a kind of real somber, emotional touch. I think this is just a really incredible song.
Yeah, Pain of Voices, not to sound like a wanker, but I had this album before it came out as a single. That did make me sound like a wanker, but yeah, when this came on, you could maybe not even realize this was Venom Prison until it goes into that can't shake this feeling of guilt, and her doing those really recognizable screams of hers. But yeah, the piano flourishes in the break, and there's the bit where
I love that. Yeah, very
I
so
love
delicate.
That. Oh god,
it's so fucking good. And when you think it's gonna just boot off, and it doesn't, it lets you sit with the verses again. It's such a simple trick, and then it gets that super kind of laid back solo, like you're saying, but just again, they know how to put a song together, and the clean vocals. She wants to do more clean vocals in the future, because this is the first time she's properly actually tried it. And I kind of like that we get all those different sides of Larissa's voice on this record, because it's never all of them work, and none of them feel either overbearing or not her.
Yeah, well, I mean, that doesn't even cover all of what that song does, because it has a fucking almost trip hop style beat at the start, and Larissa's clean voice is she doesn't sound like a trained singer. She's got a very particular breathy, moaned kind of quality to her that I think it enhances the atmosphere of horror and death that you get with Venom Prison, that album cover. That's a really cool thing to land on with the clean vocals, which is important to making them work within what Venom Prison do. I almost expected the fucking the chorus of Darkness Within by Machine Head to come in or something after the I can't shake this feeling, that kind of song. What you said about going back to the verse, it's another thing I can see them getting better at again, and not rely, I guess, on repeating sections so much the way the first few minutes of it do. It builds that part and then it just kind of retreats to where the first verse started. Make them a little more fluid, but where it does escalate to is fascinating and impactful, and does have this real propulsiveness to it. And it's like I mentioned Arch Enemy. They went off in this direction of being too cheesy for a lot of Western metal audiences. I should say English-speaking metal audiences, really. And Venom Prison, they're almost taking after Cat of Decapitation in trying to find their own new kind of melodeath to kind of take it forward. After similar things have been said about them with deathcore when they turned up, very individual in that sense. What I said about the scatteredness of the vocal embellishments to me being quite emblematic of the album, I think there are an awful lot of details on this record that really feel like the whole band have gone to town on chucking all of these ingredients in without holding themselves back. We've mentioned the electronics in Golden Apple of the Hesperides. A song like Nemesis, I think is great in terms of that's them crafting a death metal style anthem. It's not the widest leap out of death metal here by any means, but it's let's try and make a song like that as catchy and sing along even without melody as we can make it with that I Am the Damaged One part. Yeah. I also particularly love 40 seconds in, that part where it just sounds like Bolt Thrower have been hijacked for that double bass tank is incredible.
Yeah, that song is so fucking good. Yeah, and you're talking about how good that kind of line is. Because it sounds like The Blister Exists by Slipknot.
That is well Slipknot, that I Am the Damaged One, you deserve all the damage done. Yeah, you're right on that.
Yeah, but the fucking, again, electronics, there's a wee-woo kind of effect for 10 seconds at the end of Judges, a malfunctioning robot has just entered the mix. Alongside that, you've got the slight symphonic element that creeps in more as it goes along, really. It's there on Gorgon Sisters, which otherwise is Circle Pit Central. Veil of Night brings in some kind of Martyr in Bleeding Through style keys, that kind of trembling gothic shiver that they have. And then Technologies of Death has this galloping horns blast. There is an awful lot of ideas where it feels like the creativity on this record is really like just unshackled and unleashed, and it's full of surprises. I think it will be more cohesive in future when they figure out which of the many, many seeds they've planted here are really worth nourishing and where to further focus their energies and develop even further. Like, they've cracked how to make their music that is so dense sound big here. Now, fucking symphonics, vocal dynamics, electronics, keys, like all of these things have further potential and a higher ceiling of what they can do with them with quality, which is very exciting.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with you, but I kind of just love how this album, it just has it all in there, and it's just full of so many.
I really appreciate that about it as well. I just think people who might be jumping to call this like, you know, masterpiece, career defining record. Like, I think it's a really, really exciting turn. They can do better with it.
But I completely agree, because you just look at the leap from album to album, and I think this is still not the finished article, but. When you have a song like Gorgon Sisters, which has all those other things, but has like a dive bomb and has just like the most stupid, obnoxious riff at the end, like when they're doing all that and still fitting all these symphonic elements and all that, I'm just like, I just feel like a kid in a toy shop, just running around, just like wanting to grab everything and just being like, yeah, I love it all, I want it all. Like, it's kind of how this album makes me feel.
There's so much stuff on it, and yeah, like you're saying, Perrin, about the like kind of like focusing in and improving it going on. Still a fucking like 9 out of 10. Like, it's still absolutely like,
it's one of the best records of the year so far, for sure. I'm not denying that one bit.
Yeah, no, but just like the kind of untapped potential is ludicrous on this band.
Yeah, the sheer fucking, again, fundamentally, these guys can riff. Like, the sheer killer turns that you get in songs that it reminds me of how Employed to Serve have changed in terms of, like, you know, not being dissimilar for that kind of larger area. Like, Veil of Night is a fucking headbanger, and unashamedly so, even with a big emotional melody lift. I'm just saying, I know the prevailing narrative right now is that this is a huge jump in quality for Venom Prison that makes their previous records look limited. My feeling is actually that Animus and Samsara are more fully realised in the concepts of what they are going for. Like, what on Samsara really needed tightening up to take that sound further? Not a whole lot. That's in part why they've taken this huge step away from all of that outright extremity into something more. But this is absolutely Venom Prison's bravest record, and do I think it may lead to their best record if they keep mastering it further? I really hope so.
Yeah, I think a lot of the discourse has been around, and again, like not kind of doing anyone down who said this, but a lot of the kind of like chat is like, oh, you know, it's reinventing the genre and things like that. And like, I don't think it's doing that, but they can do that in the future, absolutely. But I think what they've done here is they've just reinvented what they can be. Because exactly. At the moment, like, they are a brilliant death metal band, adding a bunch more stuff in, and it all works, and they can do what they want with it next time.
Yeah, and while I am, I guess, ideally looking to the future when it comes to like a career-defining record or whatever, right now, this album is obviously going to appeal to so many more people than before. If you weren't completely crazy about how much they'd mastered sheer ferocity in the past, the increased accessibility and increased dynamic range here is going to win them so many admirers. If you've never really gone with Venom Prison before, now is definitely a strong moment to check out what they're doing and maybe change your mind. That's Erebos by Venom Prison.